It probably does a few laps around the racecourse first, overlapping policy a multiple, yet policy is probably slow to react. However, there are some safeguards already in place where data governance, it could be at the state level or it could even be at an industry level. The GDPR is a policy that actually governs areas where sometimes the models are built on the right GDPR data. We do see a variance across nations where some nations actually will see a different view on GDPR, taking, say, a conservative, or they could actually be others that actually take a less conservative, enabling free use of data for AI building.
WGIC Horizons, a podcast for latest technology, business, partnerships, and policy trends in geospatial industry.
Welcome to the future of geospatial, where we explore the intersection of cutting-edge technology and the evolving landscape around spatial intelligence. My name's Aaron Addison, and I am joined by Leonard Sands. And today we're diving into a topic that's reshaping industries, societies, and even our understanding of reality itself: technology disruption in geospatial and what comes next. This is episode 3 of a series where we unpack 4 key areas: technical disruption, business. Today's episode will focus on policy and governance. Are country-level and industry-specific policies keeping pace? Spoiler alert, not really. We'll examine where the gaps are and what needs to change to ensure ethical, secure, and inclusive innovation. In a future episode, we'll conclude our series where we dive into human capital and ethics.
Let's start with the big picture. We're living in a time where machines are no longer just tools. They're collaborators, decision makers, and in some cases, competitors. The rise of AI agents, autonomous systems, and predictive analytics has sparked a new wave of innovation, but it's also raised the fundamental question: what is the role of humans in a machine-driven world? This challenge, human versus machine, isn't just philosophical, it's practical, it's political, and it's personal. In the geospatial industry, we're seeing this tension play out in real time. From automated mapping to AI-driven site selection, the tools are evolving faster than humans respond to them. We also see the need for effective policy and democratization of data. Our active role in the UN Ocean Decade is an example of capturing ocean floor data for democratized use, enabling a safe and livable world. Aaron, welcome to Fugro, and it's great to have you back again. And now we're on the podcast. The third time in the series. Episode. So this one is it's a difficult topic. We've gone through technology in episode 1. We addressed what was out there that can be used, and then the business implications of how does the geospatial industry see and experience the AI disruption. But today's topic about policy and governance gets quite a deep-rooted topic around actually what is safe use or applicable use of AI in geospatial. And because it's so data-rich, the variance of where it can be deployed for the wrong purposes to where it can be deployed for the right purposes is quite deep.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, first and foremost, what a fantastic facility you guys have here at Fugro. It's amazing new building. I know everybody I've talked to smiling and happy to be in the new building. So it's a fantastic area, and congratulations on making the move. Sounds like some really great things are happening here in the Netherlands for you. Our topic is policy and governance, and it's one of those things that means different things to different people. It can have many faces. It can have many facets. It can mean something positive to one part of our society and mean something more challenging to another part of our society. And sometimes, we may think that technology should be in the front seat and drive this. But if we ignore the cultural piece, if we ignore the societal piece of these conversations, I think that is something that can stop the technology in its tracks. So I think while it is a difficult conversation sometimes, and certainly around the world, these conversations are varied, they're diverse, they're uneven, as is the case with almost all policy. But yet it's important to dive in and really have those difficult conversations around emerging technologies, the speed of technology change. Today we're talking about AI, but I know in our past podcasts we've even mentioned future technologies like quantum, and there'll be a whole new set of challenges with that we're not even considering in the AI conversation. So there will be something always where we have to discuss this, and maybe that's a good point to start, is that at times I feel like technology is moving, at some multiple of the speed of policy. We all know, by definition, policy is reactive. Policy is never ahead of the technology, it doesn't seem like. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that leads to unintended consequences. But that's just the way it is. And so that's the world that we navigate in geospatial and Earth observation. But let's unpack that a little bit and talk about examples where we've seen regulatory lag, but also seen challenges around ethical use of AI or geospatial. Data privacy comes into that conversation quite often. And then, looking towards the future, things like quantum security, whatever encryption, whatever privacy that we might have today, is that going to serve us well in the future? And as we oftentimes say on this podcast, the spoiler alert is probably not.
Probably not. Yeah. So we talked about the speed at which technology, particularly now AI, is accelerating the industry, and actually, in fact, all industries. It probably does a few laps around the race course first. Overlapping policy are multiple, yet policy is probably slow to react. However, there are some safeguards already in place where data governance, it could be at the state level or it could even be at an industry level. The GDPR is a policy that actually governs areas where sometimes the models are built on the right GDPR data. We do see a variance across nations where some nations actually will see a different view on GDPR, taking, say, a conservative, or they could actually be others that actually take a less conservative, enabling free use of data for AI building. But overall, there was this conversation we were diving into around, can policy and governance be enabled by AI? Because in the traditional form of building policy and governance, it does take time. There is a lag always, but the lag is getting bigger. And how can policy be enabled by AI is an interesting thing to unpack.
It is, and I think it's still, it's one of those things that's unfolding in real time before us. And what, we think about what creates that lag. It's not that policy is getting any slower, it's that technology is getting faster. And so in the traditional model of creating, socializing, and putting policy and governance in place may just not be as appropriate for the future. And that would hold true whether it's AI or some other technology topic. We've got things that are just moving very quickly. And I think, as a microcosm of that, you think about the education models and the strain that's been put on them by digital devices, phones in the classroom, right? And so teachers that were not comfortable with that oftentimes set a policy, immediately says no phones in my classroom. Well, that may not be practical, right? Because I remember whenever I was, dating myself here, but when I was in elementary school, there was no calculators in the classroom. And, fast forward to when my daughters were coming up through school, not only were they permitted, they were mandatory in the classroom. And so I think you're seeing that same kind of thing happen now with AI. Again, using education as an example, where, instead of trying to keep students from using AI on their homework, they're designing exercises where they have to use AI on their homework and bringing it as a tool. And I think that is a cornerstone of this ethical discussion, is to present it not as a magic solution, but to educate future generations on responsible use of it as a tool, and that extends into geo as well, and Earth observation. So I'm encouraged that I've seen progress in those areas. There's a lot more to do. As we said, it's not the what is this saying? The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. Certainly is a challenge in the global stage.
So I think there was the knee-jerk reactions to situations which are new, and how policy or governance can actually kick in and actually be perhaps in the wrong direction. So how does the industry, both on the policy side and the commercial side, how does it manage this change effectively? How through the World Geospatial Council, Industry Council, can we be more effective so that the knee-jerk reactions, even to the point where we see some states, some nations are lagging in the benefits from AI to others and more advanced countries. How can we actually play a role?
Well, I think there's a couple things that we can do, and we have been starting down already. 2-3 years ago now, WGIC released a GeoAI report that touched on some of this ethical use. Around that same time, we also released a data privacy for geospatial report. And that's one of the great things about WGIC, where we can say, okay, here's an opportunity for all of our members that represent various aspects of the industry to come together and say, we're not saying this is the final word on this topic. We're just offering some thoughts from the industry perspective. And that might be on data privacy and AI, or it might be on an emerging technology. I remember a couple of years ago, metaverse was everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, what does that mean to the geospatial industry? And we released a short report on that. And so again, I think it's really about the input, but it's also about demonstrating that ethical behavior, holding each other to a high standard, not cutting corners, just to do something faster than the competition, but doing it in a responsible way, because ultimately, whether companies realize that or not, the actions of individual companies can reflect on the entire industry. And that does damage to all of the industry, not just that company. So I think what we're starting to hear are more conversations along those lines to say, okay, what should this thing look like? We can't write the policy, but we can be a reference. We can be a resource to the policymakers that do have the task of creating this policy. And what is it we want them to know? What is it that we would want them to hear from the perspective of the industry? Not maybe going as far as lobbying, because WGIC is not a lobbying organization, but we certainly have a voice, and we certainly can demonstrate and lead on these topics. And right now the time is AI and what the implications of that are, not just in data and data privacy, but also I think in what we're starting to call decision grade data. And how do we get something meaningful out of everything? How do we reproduce that result? How do we have confidence not only in what we're doing ourselves, but how does that translate to trust in the end user community? And really, in many ways, what we're seeing are companies are selling trust. We trust the outputs. We trust your products. We trust the results that are coming out of your model. And if we ourselves don't understand our models, or we're not able to duplicate results out of our models, then that's where I think we still need some focus and effort into improving that.
Yeah. So the audience out there, it's not just looking to government or looking to entities to actually set policy and governance, but there is also a responsibility inside commercial organizations to also define what is safe use, ethical use, and appropriate use of AI, and to make sure that their legacy, their performance is able to be repeated without having, AI kind of putting out results which may not be the right result, may be prone to error.
And again, that's the speed of change challenge, because we have legacy and historical models for doing this throughout the business. So, and I started my career, the first third of my career was in engineering and civil engineering. And not everybody was a registered civil engineer. There were certainly people that were doing work on plans and blueprints for bridge design. But all of that was vetted, all of that was reviewed, all of that was certified by someone who had a certification in bridge design, right? And they were the responsible party. Where is that in AI, right? And so best efforts in many cases that companies will hire an AI officer or an ethics officer to work on these kinds of things. But really, I think the companies that are going to differentiate themselves from the rest of the industry are the ones that take that a step further and integrate that mentality and that culture throughout their organization, and don't just place it on the shoulders of one or two individuals.
It goes back to the behaviors, is cultivating the right behaviors, and it can't just be expected that an agency would cultivate that behavior. It has to start because of the speed of which AI is disrupting our industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's move on and talk a little bit about this unevenness around the globe. I know earlier we mentioned global disparities, but there's a real concern, I think, of some nations being left behind, not having a voice. And there are different initiatives that have tried to focus on this, or different parts of this around the world. The Geospatial Knowledge Infrastructure being one, GKI. UNGGIM has looked at this. But I know that's also a big topic in the Netherlands, and specifically with Fugro. So tell us a little bit about what's going on at Fugro to actively support all of this.
So Fugro is active in the UN Ocean Decade. We've been there for 5 years now. And as part of that, we collect data. And that data is provided on the ocean floor to be democratized, to be available, so that the better understanding of the oceans can be used for research purposes, but also for any governments that need to plan or to understand what their oceans are at stake. So for us, it's really rooted in the core of a safe, livable world. The Earth is very complex, and geodata is part of this solution to understanding the complexity. And the interpretation, the insights, or the decoding of geospatial data on the Earth is where we can actually help in matters of the planet at large.
So that's very interesting. I know I was in a meeting back last month in December that was looking at this topic from the Earth observation standpoint. And, you spoke to this democratization and the UN Ocean Decade. And I'm hearing a lot of conversations about whether or not government's even the right place for some of these things to be housed long-term, to be governed, et cetera. And, I think it's still a work in progress, certainly. But it's an interesting time as administrations around the world, their priorities change, as resources are limited or more widely available. Programs tend to sort of ebb and flow at times. And maybe, your thoughts as you participated in this program, is that the function of an NGO? Is that the function of a multi-agency consortium? Is that a function of government? What are some of the challenges and some of the positives around how, it's easy to say we're going to democratize data, how are you going to pull that off, right? Because there's still bills that have to be paid, and
Yes.
servers and bandwidth and all these things.
So you can certainly say that the journey for mapping the Earth, decoding the Earth to be better at living on the Earth, it spans far greater than a 4-year term of a government. That's quite clear. I mean, to collect the data, to map the areas, and then process it, make it available, goes for years. And you can't just do it instantaneously. You'll get different levels of resolution, say from satellite data, which there's plenty of it, but often the data, the quality that's necessary for the right decisions on decoding the Earth needs to be a higher fidelity. So that takes time. So we do see that the longer duration organizations who are focused on this topic and are not swayed by, for instance, political periods in their journey, but they stay steadfast to that role, are the effective ones. But of course, then they need sponsorship.
Yeah.
They need the support of industry. They are unable to actually alone do it by collecting the data and making the data available. So that's where industry needs to support both in the commercial areas. And there is at Fugro, the safe, livable world really attracts all of our employees. So there is a benefit, even in commercial businesses, to actually participate and be doing the right thing for the Earth. Because as we move forward, I mean, we see changes that need to be addressed, and the only way we can do it is by focusing on it and understanding, decoding it properly. So,
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's fantastic to see that happening here at Fugro, but I'm seeing that in other companies as well. It's like there has to be a purpose, and that has to be in alignment with the especially the younger generations that are coming up and becoming part of the workforce in these days. So I think that'll be something that we want to keep an eye on as well. So our final topic here that I wanted to touch on today is around cross-border data sharing. And we talked about the World Ocean Decade a little bit, but let's take a little bit more focus on topics like data sovereignty, surveillance, ethical use. When we bring all of these data sets together, sometimes there are insights that become available. Maybe not even the reason why the data was collected in the first place, but alternate uses or additional uses. And what is happening, or what have you seen happen, whether it's here in the Netherlands or in Europe or globally, that is becoming part of the conversation around AI, but also around geospatial?
Definitely the borders are rising on data sovereignty. There are some nations which are already very clear in their data sovereignty. And we do see trends in other areas where data sovereignty is growing. And it extends not just to access to capturing the data, but it also extends now into where it is processed. So geographically, there are constraints now where if you capture data in that country, it has to be processed and only provisioned or delivered in that country. The territorial borders of processing data outside have been locked in. So we're seeing that more and more often. It's a trend. It does break down democratization of data. Interestingly, there's always that comparison about Google Street Map or Google Earth, and data that is captured is always referenced to say, well, you can actually go and look at it, maybe lower resolution, but you can get that free on Google. And there's always this debate. It's like, well, okay, if you can get it free on Google, then why lock in all of these controls around it? But no, there is a trend which we're curious to see where it ends up, because there's the need for AI to learn. The worst thing for AI is to be built on a bias of data. So even the data types and the data available can inherently build a bias into AI. And if AI is then used for responsible purposes, the outcomes or the influence that it does into decision making can be rooted actually in the data provided for AI to learn.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And that sort of leads into our next topic, which is, are industry standards a way to address that? You know, I think when I hear about standards, what's the old line is the great thing about standards is that there are so many to choose from, right? And I hear the standard conversation. I understand the need for the standards, be them through more geospatial specific standards that come through organizations like OGC, or more broad standards through the international community, through ISO and so forth. But what I hear in the real world are conversations around agility, around interoperability. It would be great, it would be lovely if we both spoke the same language. The reality is we still have to work together. We still have to communicate. And is that better served through implementation of things like APIs, where we can exchange data, even though we're not going to talk the same language? Or is it really critical that we all speak the same language and flatten this out? And so and again, AI can be a tool that can help facilitate that, not just one that's leveraging that. So, do we have too many standards? Is it too diffuse? Are we in a new era where standards aren't as important, given AI's capability to work the interoperability piece? And we should refocus on that. And it really is all over the map when I talk to companies around the world on what they think about that. And sometimes that's based on how much money they've spent on developing standards or being members of various organizations. But I think that's something that's front and center in many conversations. And again, it's still something that's in the back room, not getting very much traction in other conversations, depending on where you're at in the world.
In geodata, in general, there's dependencies on different data sets. So we capture the Earth using different sensors, but that's a very defined vignette of the behavior of the Earth. You change a sensor, you'll get a different perspective, a different measurement. And the dependency, there's interrelationships between all data sets. And there's that point at which we haven't got to yet, is how do we bring together all of the data sets to then not only imagery, LiDAR, water temperatures, water flows, or vegetation cover. There is this cycle, the link between all of them. And that is not being tackled yet. Of course, it's a lot of data, and there's dispersed data sets to actually get to that point. We're not seeing yet the standards of which bring all of that together. We do see in some market sectors that are very particular about how new technologies are introduced, and they're probably more high-risk, sensitive sectors. So things have to be vetted thoroughly, but then there's other market segments which are very free and open to actually adopt technology. So there is a phasing of maturity, as always, with this technology change.
Absolutely.
The policies, the governance, and the standards will need to keep on evolving. But as we see waves of technology and AI going through different market sectors, we will see a maturity as we go forward. Yeah.
Well, I think we're out of time. We'll have to wrap it up there. Certainly, much still to be learned, much still work to be done around policy governance, the role of standards. My hope is that the industry has a voice, a seat at the table in those conversations, because I think it's very important for the people who are doing the work and producing many of these outputs to be involved in that process. So with that, we'll wrap it up. And next time we'll move into episode 4 of our limited series. In fact, the last episode, as we have it right now, and we'll focus on the human capital and the ethics of all of this. So thank you very much, Leonard.
Thank you, Aaron. Today we explored how geospatial policy is struggling to keep pace with AI disruption. We looked at the regulatory lag around AI ethics and data privacy, the widening gap between developed and developing nations, and how initiatives like geospatial knowledge infrastructure and Fugro's capacity building efforts can help close it. We also touched on the challenges of cross-border data sharing, where sovereignty and ethics collide, and how Fugro's work in the UN Ocean Decade shows what is possible when organizations share real-time geospatial data for global benefit. And finally, we questioned whether current industry standards can keep pace with AI and quantum innovation, or if the sheer number of frameworks is holding us up. Geospatial governance is entering a new era, and keeping pace with AI will require bold thinking, global cooperation, and smarter standards. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, keep building the future of geospatial together.
The future of geospatial isn't just about better maps or faster data. It's about redefining how we interact with the world, our world, and with each other. Technology disruption is inevitable, but how will we respond? Well, that's still up to us. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation around these topics, be sure to subscribe to the WGIC YouTube channel, share, and join the conversation. You can find more insights and resources available on the WGIC website. And as always, stay curious, stay critical, and stay connected.
Like, subscribe, and share to help us spread insightful geospatial conversations.